Hello everyone, and welcome to this Brazilian Grand Prix blog. First of all, sorry it's a couple of days late. I took a few days to take it all in, really. It was an extremely busy race, wasn't it? I watched it back a couple of times and made sure I'd seen all the events ready to make this blog, so I thought that was best rather than talking about something that I'd barely even seen. Okay, so we'll start with our new world champion then, Sebastian Vettel. He just clinched it by 3 points. So it was pretty close in the end, wasn't it? Because he went into the race 13 points up, so he lost 10, but still managed to just about clinch the title. I think my views have been made fairly clear in the past on him. I'm not a major fan, but I must admit I did gain respect for him over the Brazilian Grand Prix weekend. He did drive well, although I do believe that the shunt in the beginning with Bruno Senna was his fault. Senna was up the inside of him, a bit of a half move, must be said, but he still was more or less halfway up the inside of him. He's not like he wasn't, barely even had his front wing up the inside of him, and Vettel just turned in on him. Just didn't see him, but, it's just a mistake that you can't really see someone like Alonso making often, or Hamilton, or, the best, the greats. So, it was his fault that happened in the first place, in my opinion, and then there was a bit of an argument over whether he overtook a few under yellows, but I think that was red and yellows. I'm not sure that was anything, but debatable where we could have got a penalty, really, behind, from taking Bruno Senna and Sergio Perez out of the race. I think if they did that to Vettel, they probably would have got a penalty. And later on, Hulkenberg did get a penalty for doing a similar thing. So, debatable whether we should have got a penalty for that, but he didn't. And after that, it was a fantastic drive by him, to be fair. He had a few radio issues, didn't he? And he did drive fantastically well, drove quickly and through the field, and did a fair few overtaking manoeuvres. So, after that initial shunt that he had, it was a very good race by him. So, he did gain respect, although I still wanted Alonso to win it. I think he deserved it more this year, but you can't really say, well, he's done a better job, because, you're with the team you're with, aren't you? You're all one, one big unit, aren't you? You can't just say, well, the drive was amazing, but the team was bad. It's all one unit, isn't it? So, overall, Sebastian did the better job this year, although he did get lucky a few times, not only in this race, when he almost did too much damage, didn't he? Did a bit of a dent in his exhaust, and, took a chunk out of his car from hitting Senna, and still managed to survive, but the other two were out. Extremely lucky to survive that, but yes, again, a bit more luck, but you don't win a championship just with luck, do you? For all we know, someone like Pedro De La Rosa could be extremely lucky, but we don't know because he's so far back and we don't really see much of him, but so he's driven well anyway, so fair play to him. Like I said, I have gained respect, so I look forward to next season and seeing how he does. Perhaps he'll polish off the things that making me lose respect for him, and then I'll fully respect him next year. On to Lewis Hamilton then. I'm going to go, no I won't, I'll go with Fernando Alonso next actually. I won't go with the person I support, I'll go with the person who came second. Only fair, isn't it? So we've driven for Ferrari this year then, who haven't given a good enough car really, but still came 3 points away from the world champion. It was a fantastic drive from him all season and in Brazil. Once again, finished on the podium. I don't think anyone ever really doubted that he was going to finish on the podium, despite the fact that he started right down in 8th position. Or was it 7th, somewhere around there. I don't think anyone really expected him to be off the podium, and he did indeed. 2nd place, wasn't it? It's a fantastic drive by him. No mistakes, as per usual with Fernando. Fantastic start, few good overtaking manoeuvres, no real mistakes, and he just drove fantastically well, didn't it? Bit of help from Massa by getting that 2nd position, but he still would have been 3rd even without Massa's help. So, fantastic drive by him. I think he's, like I said, driven well enough to deserve the championship, but unfortunately Ferrari just couldn't give him the car to clinch it. But it's been a fantastic season overall for Alonso. I really respect that guy. I would say he's possibly the best driver. I won't say he's the best because I personally rate Hamilton, but he's right up there. Them two are, I think, equal top really. So I'll go on to our race winner next then, Jenson Button in the McLaren. So he won it in the end. It was a good drive by him. Didn't make any mistakes. I think personally he would have been beaten by both Hulkenberg and Lewis Hamilton if they didn't take each other out. It was a bit of a, inherited win, but he certainly drove well to be anywhere near the podium. And some would say that before the safety car, he would have smashed it anyway. Him and Hulkenberg were something like 40 seconds ahead of the field by making the right tyre choice before the first safety car. So without that, I think he would have probably won it. I can't see Hulkenberg really beating him in a straight fight, but he could have done. I'll move on to Hulkenberg then next. Fantastic drive, I would say, by him. Bit of a mistake, really, wasn't it, with taking Hamilton out? It's obviously, it was a fantastic drive. If you ignore that, it was, one of the drives of the season, in my opinion. But, you got to consider it, haven't you? He did really, really well to get to the point. Like I said, did as well as Button, right up with Button. 40 seconds ahead of the rest of the field, just him and Button out on their own. pretty much guaranteed second place, then got the safety car, and then got overtaken by Lewis Hamilton a little bit later on, and then decided to dive out the inside of him and lost control of the rear and just hit Hamilton, which was, I think, partly the Caterham's fault that was going a bit slow in front of him, it must be said. But I mean, it's just a letdown, isn't it? Like I said, it was a fantastic drive up until that point. To be anywhere, I mean, he was leading the race for quite a few laps. To be anywhere near the front in a car that isn't a McLaren, Red Bull, or Ferrari, frankly, is it's just amazing. A Force India that's probably considered to be sort of the 5th or 6th best car, somewhere around there. I mean, it certainly wasn't the best car, was it? It was looking very good, to be fair, but I mean, where did they finish in the constructors? They finished 7th in the constructors, Force India. And they probably had the 4th fastest car, I would say, somewhere around there in that race. But yes, it was a fantastic job by him. If it wasn't for that little mistake, which unfortunately did just put a bit of a down on it, unfortunately. Moving on to then Lewis Hamilton, the guy who I support. Once again, unlucky, wasn't it? I think this race was pretty much the story of the entire season. Very unlucky. I mean, he was. I mean, I guess he probably could have avoided it by diving out wide or such like, but there's not really a lot he could have done, was there? Hulkenberg sort of surprised him up his inside and then slid his rear into his front wheel that damaged his suspension. Fantastic drive up to that point once again by Lewis Hamilton. Made the wrong strategy call going to the interzone in the race. Got a little bit lucky with the safety car, but then got massively unlucky by getting taken out. So I think he would have won the race comfortably. Well, comfortably, maybe not comfortably, but I think he would have won the race. I don't think anyone really doubted that. But once again, unlucky Hamilton, unlucky Vettel, unfortunately. But there we go, that's how these things go. So there's that. Moving on to Felipe Massa then. Massa, his home race in Brazil. Obviously the second Ferrari driver, came 3rd on the podium, would have been 2nd if he didn't let Alonso through, but I think, Alonso was the only one left in the championship. Anyone would have done that, I would say. So that's sort of fair enough. I mean, he was tearful on the podium, wasn't he? It was brilliant drive once again by him. The last few races, I would say he's probably come back to his form that he was in 2008 when he almost won that title. It's a brilliant drive the last few races. Let's hope it carries on next season and he gives Fernando a bit of competition in the same car. That would be good. I think hopefully they should get equal status at the beginning of next year at least until Massa falls behind or vice versa. I can't see them really supporting Alonso right from race 1, not making him pull over and things. That I don't think that will happen. I think Ferrari are fairer than that, but as soon as he falls back a bit, I think then they will. But so look forward to next season, see if he can carry it over. I mean, obviously the whole getting a new contract for next season must have boosted him, so let's hope that he drives just as well as he has done last few races next season, because I really respect that guy. A little bit unfortunate with his crash a few years ago, but I do respect him. I think he's one of the best, really. If he can continue his form, I mean, like I say, nearly won a world championship. There isn't any bad drivers that have won a world championship, so he almost did it, didn't he? If it a bit more luck for him, he would have done it. So fingers crossed he carries on next season. So on to Mark Webber then, 4th in the championship, 4th in the race. Let's just have a look where he was in the championship. It looks like he came 6th in the championship in the end then, quite a way down actually in the end. Fairly average season for him really, wasn't it? I mean, I don't really know why Red Bull are keeping him, to be honest. I think it's just a safety. They know that Webber will get beaten by Vettel. They know that he will move over when need be. Not as easy as Felipe Massa, but he will do it. And they know that he's reasonably good. I mean, he's won a couple of races this season, but I mean, you can't help but think they probably could have snapped up Lewis Hamilton this year, or for next year. And, I mean, Vettel is very quick, but they would have been very closely matched. I mean, I won't comment on who I think would have been faster, but they would have been incredibly close, I would say. So, I think they're just playing it safe, really, keeping Webber. I'm not really sure what he's still doing with Red Bull, to be honest. I mean, he'd be incredibly valuable to someone like Marussia or Caterham, but Red Bull, I think he's just not that brilliant, is he, really? If he was at Ferrari, everyone would be saying, like they were with Massa, he's out of there, but I think he's the safe bet, as I said. So, who are we going to talk about next then? Michael Schumacher, his last race, wasn't it? Good drive, Rainmaster, supposedly. I mean, at one point he was last, stone cold last, but apparently did have a puncture earlier on. I don't think we caught it on the TV cameras, but he did have a puncture earlier on, so fantastic drive up to 7th in the race. It would have been 6th if he didn't let Vettel through, who he seems or acts like a fatherly figure to Vettel, so that's why he did that. If that had been the difference between the championship, he'd have been more than happy to do it. So, good drive from him. The Mercedes' first points in a few races. So, yes, I mean, not a lot to say really, is it? It's been his best season since his comeback. I believe he's beaten. No, I don't think he's beaten Rosberg actually in the standings. Let's have a quick look. So Rosberg scored 93 points and Schumacher scored 49. So yes, a few behind, but he's been fantastically unlucky, hasn't he, with reliability. Schumacher, particularly in the beginning of the season, just continually went out with things like DRS problems and just it's just complete. It's such bad luck. I think he went out something like the first 6 of 8 races or something like that. It was a really high figure, but that's it, I would say, now for Schumi. Never coming back. I would be very, very surprised if he comes back. There's been hints of him taking on a bit of an advisory role at Mercedes. We'll wait to see about that. But good drive anyway to finish off his career once and for all, I would say. So I think he lost a bit of respect, didn't he, with his comeback? But he's still a good driver, no doubt. I mean, I would say he's beaten Rosberg, despite the fact he didn't beat him in the standings. I would say he's actually overall beaten in the season. He's been the better driver. Moving on then to, I mean, there's not really much more to talk about, really, in terms of that race. Well, I suppose we could talk about Kimi Räikkönen going the wrong way. He claimed that actually that was because he's been up there before and it was open last time he went up there, but this time they'd shut the gate. So it's actually his experience that's playing against him, really. Bit of an interesting one, wasn't it? It's a bit strange, really. He's effectively stopped dead on the circuit because he had to return to the same point for about, what was it, between 5 and 10 seconds? I mean, that's a huge amount of time to stop dead, isn't it? So, bit of an interesting one, and I think he completed every lap of the season, barring that very last lap. He was 1 lap down in the end, so completed, every single lap of the season, barring one. It's been a fantastic season for him. I respect him and rate him a lot now, really. Such a good season. I mean, I think he drove well enough to get the championship if the Lotus car was quick enough. He's consistently scored points. Like I said, completed every single lap. You can't fault him, frankly. He's just been complete rock for Lotus. Next year, if they got a fast enough car, I wouldn't put a championship past him. Moving on then to his teammate. I think he's driven fairly well this season. He's obviously had the mistakes. He's been very quick. It's like Maldonado. He's been very quick, but just been inexperienced, really, hasn't he? He's just made too many mistakes, frankly. It's Grosjean. So look forward to next season for him. Moving on then to, who should we go to next? I'll go with Sauber then. So they're losing both of their drivers this year. Perez has driven well, obviously with his McLaren contract next year. He's driven fairly well. He's gone off the ball a bit, hasn't he, since signing the contract, but we'll see what happens next year. Not really much more to be said on that. Like I said, just wait and see. Fingers crossed he does well enough for McLaren. Kobayashi, I think that's pretty much it for him. I'll be surprised if he lands a Force India seat or someone like Marussia or HRT. Well, HRT are probably out of it. We'll talk about that in a minute. Someone like Marussia, if he landed a seat with them, he'd be quite useful to them, but I think I'll be surprised that we see him again. He's in a group of many drivers that are reasonably talented, but with no money, and they're ageing a bit, unfortunately. So I'll be surprised if we see him again. And they've got 2 new signings, haven't they? They have signed Hülkenberg for next season, and I mean, Hülkenberg's a fantastic driver. It's a good shout for Sauber, but I'm not really sure it's going to be an advantage for Hülkenberg, really. I mean, Sauber have been the stronger team this year, but it's been a bit peaky, really, isn't it? They've scored a few podiums, but that's about it. They haven't really, I would say Force India a bit more consistent. So we'll wait and see. And Force India, of course, have had that £50 million being invested now, so it wouldn't surprise me if Force India are the better team next year. So we'll wait and see on that one. And of course, they have confirmed Gutierrez. I think everyone expected that, really. It wasn't really a surprise to have him signed. I think he was knocking at the door for, I think everyone really, like I said, everyone expected it. Knocking at the door for quite some time now, really. It's not been anyone's surprise. So we'll see how he does next year. One of the new young talents coming through. Moving on briefly then to Toro Rosso. Not really much to say, is there? They've drivers done reasonably well in their first season. Fairly, average car, really, wasn't it? It's one of the worst cars, really. Comfortably ahead of the 3 new teams, but enough behind the other teams. So wait and see what they do next year. Nothing more really to be said with them. And who else are we going to talk about? So Caterham then, move on to them. So Kovalainen then, I think he's had a fantastic season. It has to be said, though, towards the latter end of the season, I would say that Petrov's possibly done the better job. He was the one that scored that vital 11th place for them in Brazil. But consistently, Kovalainen's your man, isn't he, really? He's the one that can always... Well, I don't really know how quick he is relatively. He was poor against Hamilton, but I think he's learnt a lot since then. He was quite young at that time. So, but unfortunately, it's looking like he might have lost his seat for next year. I mean, I would say that they said to him, look, if we don't get 10th place, we're going to have to sign a pay driver, like they have done with Charles Pic. If we do, we can re-sign you. But could they have said that to both drivers? Could they have said, if you're the one to get us that 10th position, we'll re-sign you? So does that mean Petrov's going to stay? Would be interesting. I mean, if Petrov can secure any Russian funding, then that would make him stay, I would say. But I would say they need to keep either one of those drivers. I'd be very surprised if they sign another new driver. Pick, I mean, that surprised me a bit. It's obviously for the money, but I mean, he's been an alright driver, hasn't he? But he's not particularly shone, and he's not particularly, been unimpressive. So we'll wait to see on that one, but we'll also wait to see on the second seat at Caterham. Hopefully they should have a much better car next year, now that they've got that 10th position back. But we'll see if they wind up with a similar level of Marussia again. I think, to be honest, they'll have done a bad job with all the extra millions that they've earned from these 10th places they keep getting. Moving on to Marussia then. So obviously they've lost Charles Pic, and they haven't confirmed any others yet. I would say they probably keep Glock just for some consistency, and they'll more than likely sign Max Chilton, the young GP2 star, which would be interesting. It's a new Brit on the grid. We'll see how he fares. Moving on to HRT then, it's not been a brilliant season for them, has it? It's comfortably, well, not comfortably, but they've been firmly at the back of the pack. Firmly 12th place in the Constructors, and I mean, there's all these doubts, isn't there, over their financial backing. They're up for sale. They have stopped developing next year's car, and no one wants to buy them, do they really? There's a lot of talk of no one wanting them. Middle of Spain, where the economy is particularly bad. There's a few other cars that could be snapped up in Britain, like Toro Rosso, for example. So I'll be very surprised if they're on the grid next year. I mean, to be honest, I'll be surprised if we see any car in their place over the next few years, because all three new teams haven't really fared that well, have they? I mean, it was an idea to bring down the costs, but we have three new teams, and none of them they've all stayed at the back. I mean, I know they're making their way forward, but we'll see if anyone even replaces them, anyone even bothers. And that's about it, I would say. That's pretty much everyone on the grid. I mean, we missed out a few people, but that's pretty much everyone. So that's it for this year's blogs then. I will certainly do them next year. They seem to be reasonably popular and spark a bit of a debate in the comments, which is always good to have. And I might do perhaps a sort of testing blog after we've had pre-season testing next year, and perhaps a winter blog after we've had all the drivers confirmed and just talking about the prospects for next year. But we'll see. I've pretty much summed up the year in this blog, and also the Brazilian Grand Prix. So it's a fantastic race, wasn't it? If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend you do. It was a really, really entertaining race. It was a fantastic race. Bit disappointed about the end result, to be honest, with Hamilton going out and Vettel win the championship, but fantastic race nonetheless. Brazil never disappoints, does it? Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.